Hello friends, it's Kat from Meow Kapow. Arteza contacted me a while ago and asked if I would try out some of their products for free, and being a lover of the price free, I totally agreed. The first thing I asked for were those tube watercolors that we swatched out not too long ago, and if you missed that video, I've linked it up in the iCard so you can give it a look-see. The thing is, when I was working with those paints, I noticed that they dried super messed up, cracked, and chalky. Not the swatches, but the actual little paint dots themselves. This led me to realize that those tube paints are not even remotely suitable for pouring into your own pans and building a palette with, which is something I'm a huge fan of doing for myself. So I messaged Arteza and said that because the tube paints very much don't follow along with something that I would use, since they can't be put in a palette, I'd like to try out their existing extruded half pan set, since, again, being able to travel with this paint would be a key point for me. They happily agreed to send me their 36 half pan set of watercolors to test, and I have to say, this has not particularly swayed my first impression of the brand. I fully intend to do a complete breakdown of how both paints perform and my opinion on each, but for now, we're going to focus only on the initial swatches. Yes, I know that's kind of a tease in a way, but I truly appreciate your patience while I gather my thoughts. In the meantime, there's nothing particularly noteworthy about the metal tin these paints come in. Like most metal watercolor tins, it comes with a finger ring on the bottom and a white metal interior, and a removable tray for the paints themselves. I have a number of metal tins, and the cheapest ones usually have a really drastic angle on one of what I'm going to call the mixing wings, meaning that if you were to use it as is, the paint would just slide along the angle and ruin a good time. You can honestly fix this just by bending the joint where the wing meets the body of this tin bird, but you can also just as easily either ignore it or rip that wing off and let it fly away. Well, you have to poke out the long metal rod that's holding it on, but that's really not difficult if you're into that kind of method. I'm not. The paints inside are extruded, meaning that each of these colors was dried in a long stick shaped to fit the pans, chopped up into individual pieces, and then shoved into a half pan after getting diced up. As a result, some of the paints don't sit flush with the half pans themselves, but not a single one of them was poorly secured, so it's not a big deal. Trust me, I poked and prodded at them for a while to make sure they couldn't come out. I also noticed that a lot of the half pans themselves seem to be a bit warped, bending in at the sides rather than being perfect straight-edged rectangles. As a connoisseur of inexpensive half pans, this is a new experience for me, and I'm not sure what it indicates as far as quality goes, but I did figure it was worth noting. This half pan set also includes a water brush inside of it that fits very nicely within the tin, and while I haven't tested it out yet, I did want to note that it came looking kind of like a hot mess. I've gotten travel brushes before that looked like a mop head explosion and didn't come to a point even when wet. The good news is, I dipped this into a bit of the water that was already on my desk, and it came to a decent point without any persuasion whatsoever, so while it may look at first like this brush would be all kinds of wacky, I do have hope that there won't be big surprises in future testing. On to the swatching! 36 colors is a lot, and I appreciated the black flap that came in the tin that had all the names of the colors and their location on it, but I appreciated even more that it was easy to remove because that thing would have been super annoying to paint around. I'll also say that the swatches on that black piece of plastic are not even a little bit color accurate, so it's super important that if you get this set yourself, you swatch out the colors on your own. I've got links in the doobly-doo for this palette, by the way, should you desire one of your own. As far as color selection goes, it's kinda weird. There's a row of nearly pastel colors that I kinda like, including the lavender and periwinkle blue and magenta. They're soft and sorta nice. Pastels are not a series of colors that I typically gravitate towards, but I can actually see myself using some of those shades in the future because I think they're pretty and would like to play with them. Weirdly, though there are 7 or debatably 8 blues in this set and 7 yellows, there are really only 2 or maybe 3 reds total, which is super weird given that those are the main colors most people would look to build their palettes with, and all the extra colors like secondaries and tertiaries and nonsensiaries are usually balanced out but never overwhelm those 3 base primaries as far as selection goes. While I personally totally appreciate that 2 of the 3 red colors, Scarlet Red and Amaranth, are cool toned, my friends who like warm reds will be stuck really only getting to work with Cadmium Red Light. And I wanted to say something about the naming of these colors, because while Cadmium Red Light is a standard pigment color that we're really used to seeing around the block at this point, there's actually no information whatsoever about what kinds of pigments are used for these paints. They could be made from ground-up ladybug shells for all we know, and be called Cadmium Red Light because it's the closest approximation, is all I'm saying. So take the actual naming scheme more as a familiar face on a new and mysterious friend. One thing that I really wanted to capture in this footage and doesn't seem to be coming across as well as I'd hoped is how these paints all dry. I wouldn't say they're chalky, per se, since I've definitely had paints that dried with a much whiter and less clear appearance, but I would say that these are a bit ashy or dusty. The color is not clear at all, and pretty much all of the swatches, if you pay attention to the black line going through them, are semi-opaque, and I'd be hard-pressed to say that maybe one or two are semi-transparent. Not a single one of them is actually transparent though, which means that there's definitely something in their formula that taints the clarity of their color. Does this make them bad paints or unusable? No, not at all, but I do not see myself busting this palette out pretty much ever beyond the videos in which I test them for y'all. Again, look out for a future investigation where I go further into the pros and cons of these sets and hopefully help answer any questions you may have about their performance in the process. If you're curious about anything in regards to these paints, please feel free to ask down in the comments, and I'll totally do my best when recording the footage for the next video to give you all the answers you seek. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already if you're interested in what's to come next. In the meantime, if you've gotten a chance to use these, as always, I'd totally like to hear about your impressions. So far, I've seen quite a lot of reviews for Arteza's gouache, but fewer opinions on their watercolors. Sometimes I think maybe I'm a bit too skeptical of products when I go in to test names we've all heard 1,000 times, so I'd just like to know if maybe some of the things I'm thinking but not yet saying are opinions I'm not the only one to have. Until I see you next time, I wish you peace, love, and pastels. Bye!